Unity Water is proud to sponsor this podcast series because we believe great news, great solutions and great outcomes deserve to be shared. See what we're all about at unitywater.com. You're listening to the Australian Water Association's podcast series.
I'm Hazel Flynn, and joining me now is Rob Lynch, General Manager Service Delivery, Operations and Service Delivery for Queensland Urban Utilities. Welcome, Rob.
Thanks, Hazel. Good to be here.
You're here to talk about a really interesting project that was undertaken in regard to having a physiotherapist on board. But it was needed because water utility operations always require manual work. They still do. And like any other industry where there is manual work, soft tissue injuries are common. What kinds of injuries in particular?
It's pretty much a lot of lower back, neck, shoulders. So these guys and girls, as part of their everyday work, will be jumping in and out of raised and lowered surfaces, typically a trench. You're getting up and you're stretching as you get up. You're lifting heavy tools in and out of the backs of trucks and those kind of things. So lower back, shoulder as you extend above your neck, and your neck itself too as you get down and start pulling things out of the ground and so forth.
So prior to this program, what would normally have happened if there was an injury, especially a workplace injury?
Guys and girls typically utilise personal leave, so they might sustain typically a niggle in the workplace, and then, as you would normally do, anybody would do this, to recover from that they would take personal leave, which is absolutely fair enough. Typically you're required to get a medical certificate if you have one or more days off. They'd get to in front of a doctor, and that person would typically ask them, what do you do for a living? And inevitably, by way, consequently, that because you work in a high intense manual area, they would genuinely link this particular issue to work related. We'd lose what we would call a lost time injury. They'd come back to us 2 days later. We would have lost that time, lost the opportunity to provide any care. They've had 2 days off, they've recovered themselves, and typically that injury tends to escalate again later down the track. So there's no opportunity for us to intervene early and treat that injury before it becomes problematic for our people down the track.
But Queensland Urban Utilities decided to try something different. Where did the spark of that idea come from?
So I'm new to the industry. I actually worked 20 plus years in the airline industry. So it's common practice to have an on-site physio in the airline industry for our baggage handlers, where it's a very, very tight environment where you're crawling around on your knees inside baggage compartment holds. So an on-site physio is part and parcel of daily operations over there. So I got to Queensland Urban Utilities. I saw the physicality of this particular work that we were doing. I saw our injury frequency rate and thought, here's an opportunity to introduce our on-site physio and essentially provide what is psychosocial care for people first and foremost. There's a lot of stress that people undergo with an injury, and secondly, we can reduce our total injury frequency rate.
So you undertook this project where you introduced an on-site physio, but it's very interesting that the physio didn't just treat injuries that happened at work, did they?
Not at all. So almost up to 50% of the injuries that we see manifest in the workplace are actually non-work related. So if you think about it, the workplace is actually quite a controlled environment. Our environment outside of work is very uncontrolled. It's sports with the kids. It's doing those things that we like doing outside of work. Pick up a niggle there, you come back to work. That tends to escalate in the work environment. So definitely part of this was to encourage our people and their families to get treated on site for free, so that we can again intervene early and prevent any issues down the track.
So you were also treating partners and kids?
Yeah. So we've got families, friends coming in. It's a free service, and again, it's essentially we want everybody to be able to access this. It's good for our people and their families as well.
The physio just didn't sit in an office waiting for injuries to come to them, did they?
No, the physio is very proactive. So they will do ergonomic assessments in the work environment. So looking at some of the manual tasks that are being done, do an assessment of the techniques that are being applied there. A lot of the new equipment that we've introduced, there's been an assessment, a risk assessment conducted by a physiotherapist on how to use this particular piece of equipment. So they're very proactive in getting out there into the work environment. It's also good for business too, because you get out there and you promote it. So you kind of bring the workforce in or go out, and some treatments effectively roadside as well.
Well, that is an interesting question. How did the workforce respond to it?
Well, yeah. So initially there was an initial lack of trust. It's new to the industry. It's Queensland Urban Utilities, from what I'm aware, are the only utility that are doing it. There was a little bit of suspicion around why. Are you trying to find out if I've got an issue? Are you trying to get rid of me perhaps down the track? What's the story behind this? That was quickly eroded though. The guys and girls soon discovered, especially with our on-site physio, Matt Fauna is a very, very personable person. Very quickly the trust was built, and we built up the number of people who were visiting our clinics each day.
So can you give me a typical example of, there's maybe a story that you could tell of somebody who went through the process, how it was different for them than it would have been previously?
I'll tell you about one that happened yesterday. So there was one of our guys in the field who, again, was jumping out of a trench. He twisted his back getting out of the trench. He notified his supervisor, or his leader rather. Leader came to site, drove him to the on-site physio, was treated, and was given what we call 2 days of suitable duties, so removed from the regular activities, do some lighter duties, participate in some further treatment, and then back to work. Go back to work probably on Monday.
And how would that have happened previously?
Yeah, so the worker would have continued, our team member would have continued for the rest of the day, probably got home, stiffened up, would have reported for work, probably reported absent for today and tomorrow, came back to work on Monday with a doctor's certificate, another lost time injury, so to speak, and no option for that person to get any treatment whatsoever, because the treating doctor may or may not, it's more than likely unlikely that they would then prescribe a physio 2 days later. The chance to intervene has already passed, so no options for them, no help for them, and no good really to the business to lose time over something that's preventable.
And in many of those injury cases, I imagine that having it not treated would make it much more likely to recur. Totally. And then be worse the next time.
Absolutely, and we get into an escalated situation where, again, it could go on to be permanent and possibly, disabling some way and affect that person's career down the track. So.
And you really did see some quantifiable results, didn't you? Some impressive
Absolutely,
results.
Yeah. So in terms of our compensable rate, so that's the rate of injury that turns into a compensation claim. That's a 75% reduction there. There's been a 50% reduction in the actual cost of claim, and a 48% reduction in the total number of claims or injuries that we've had. So really, really positive. The other thing too is that the number of days where our people are out of the workplace is 2.5 days, whereas industry is 7 days. So typically when you have an injury and you do get treatment, industry, not just this industry, but industry-wide, it's about 7 days, and we're at 2.5 days. So we're intervening earlier, getting people back to work earlier as well.
So fewer injuries,
Yep.
less time off,
Yep.
less ongoing problems for your workforce,
Yep.
less compensation.
Yep.
There is no bad side to this, is there?
No, there's not. But again, the big benefit, I think, is that psychosocial element that says it's very, very scary to get an injury for a lot of these people, especially those people who are relying on their body for their livelihood. They consider a long-term injury as possibly be a career, limiting thing. So for those guys to feel that there's an option, again, the psychosocial benefit of, that's why we did it really, has been enormous. So there isn't really a downside, no.
It really was a bit of a trial. Is it now a permanent part of operations?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So we've got 4 locations. We're treating the entire, all of Queensland Urban Utilities now, including our office-based staff, our treatment plant operators, so right across the operation. So well and truly moved into business as usual, and I think there's an opportunity for the utilities industry to take this on board also. Well,
it sounds like something that really gives a competitive advantage to a utility that's doing it, because the workforce is going to want to come to them, going to want to stay with them, and then you see those financial benefits as well.
Absolutely, yeah.
So you're out there spreading the word.
I hope so.
Oh, well, thanks for coming and spreading it with us, Rob.
It's been my pleasure.
Thank you. That was Rob Lynch, General Manager Service Delivery for Operations and Service Delivery, Queensland Urban Utilities. Thanks for listening.